Greetings, teachers. My name is Professor Weinhardt. Today, I will be teaching you about ADHD, or Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, and how to teach students living with ADHD. First, let's look at why it might be important to know about ADHD in your classroom. ADHD is the most commonly diagnosed behavior disorder of childhood. It affects about 3 to 5% of school-aged children. In Hawaii, the diagnosed percentage rate is 6.3% of all students. This means that the chances of having a student with ADHD in your classroom is extremely high. As a teacher, you should know that as of 2007, only 66.3% of those diagnosed currently receive treatment in the form of medication. This means that it is likely that the students with the ADHD in your classroom are likely to exhibit many of its symptoms throughout the school day. Be aware of students that have a hard time paying attention, daydream a lot, seem not to listen, are easily distracted from schoolwork, forget about things like assignments, are in constant motion or unable to stay seated, squirm or fidget, talk too much, are not able to play quietly if you're in elementary school, or act and speak without thinking. Students with ADHD also may interrupt other students giving answers during class. It may be difficult to diagnose a student with ADHD because there is no simple test. Teachers and parents are often at the front line of the diagnosis because diagnosis comes from the observation of the various symptoms that we have mentioned. Generally, there are 3 types of ADHD that a student can be diagnosed with. The first type, predominantly inattentive type, means it's hard for the individual to organize or finish a task, pay attention to small details, or follow instructions or conversations. The student is easily distracted and often forgets details of daily routines. The predominantly hyperactive and impulsive type means the student often fidgets and talks a lot, has a hard time sitting still for an entire class period, and often feels restless and has trouble with impulsivity. Someone who is impulsive may interrupt others a lot, grab things from other students, speak at inappropriate times, and interrupt others while they are trying to learn. The third type is a combination of the predominantly inattentive and predominantly hyperactive type. A medical doctor may diagnose ADHD if the student exhibits 6 or more of the symptoms in each category for 6 months. In order to receive a diagnosis, there must be clear evidence of a significant impairment in a school or social setting for the child. Scientists and researchers are still looking to find the exact cause of ADHD, but it is believed it is linked with DNA. There are some rumors that ADHD is caused by eating too much sugar, watching too much television, poor parenting, social and environmental factors, or poverty and family chaos. There is not enough evidence to conclude that these are the main causes of ADHD. Research only supports the linkage to genetics and DNA. So far, we have learned what ADHD, or Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, is, how students acquire ADHD through genetics, the symptoms students diagnosed with ADHD exhibit, and how students are diagnosed with ADHD to begin with. Now comes the part that we as teachers must be most concerned with. How do we teach these students? Some of the questions to consider are, do we need to treat these students differently? And if so, how do we treat them differently? The answer is yes, and we can do this through the differentiation of our teaching strategies and techniques. Earlier in the video, you met Joey. As we have observed, Joey exhibits the symptoms of ADHD and has been diagnosed. He currently receives special education services from the school he attends. Note that ADHD is not an exclusive category under IDEA, and so he receives help for his disability through the other impairment category. In order to qualify for the other health impairments category, it must be documented that Joey's ADHD substantially limits his learning ability. Let's take a look at some of the challenges that Joey must overcome in a typical class day. On Tuesdays, Joey attends his English class where he must read silently for 15 minutes. This is very difficult for Joey because he can't sit still. He must always be in motion. Joey wants to talk to his friends or even read out loud. However, according to the assignment, if he does this, he'll be breaking a rule. He'll be disturbing other students in the class. How can we help Joey read silently during SSR? A strategy suggested by Jay Ostoitz in her article Reading Strategies for Students with ADD and ADHD in the Inclusive Classroom suggests that teachers use blinders. This blocks Joey's vision from his classmates and allows him to try to focus. Although there is now significantly less distractions, Joey may still have trouble focusing on where he is in the text. Students with ADHD often lose track of their place, and this is problematic because it prevents them from reading fluently. A possible solution is to use a mask which limits the words that a student can read at any given time. It helps the students to focus on an individual sentence rather than the entire paragraph. This technique is rooted in allowing the student to focus on a single task at one time, rather than a multitude of tasks that are very distracting. On Fridays, Joey takes a test for his math class. He is only given 20 minutes to complete 25 problems. This is often overwhelming for Joey. He has trouble organizing his thoughts and managing his time. As a result, he often forgets to read the instructions and makes careless mistakes. How can we help Joey do better on his weekly math tests? In an article by ADD in School, it suggests that we should give frequent short quizzes instead of long tests. The spontaneity of the short quiz allows Joey to complete his quiz and move on to something else. He isn't required to sit there for long periods of time. The short quiz is also less intimidating than the long test. This could give Joey the confidence he needs to do well. It's important that we make the instructions on these quizzes as clear and precise as possible. Make the essay question points easy to find, keep the page format simple, include no extraneous pictures or visual distractions, and use a border around the page so you can emphasize that this is where your attention should be. Sometimes on Thursdays after school, Joey attends an art class. There's always a lot of pencils, pens, and gadgets to play around with, but not always is there enough for everyone in the class. As a result, Joey is very impatient and often tries to grab things away from his classmates. He is very impulsive and wants things immediately. How can we help Joey learn to share with other students? How can we help Joey have some patience? In The Inclusive Classroom by Mastropi and Scruggs, it suggests that students with ADHD should make use of self-instruction and self-monitoring techniques. They should keep a daily journal of how often they did something during class. For example, how often he visited the art supply station to grab a new pencil. How many times was the pencil not there and he went to visit another student instead? But the most important part of the self-monitoring exercise is to record how many times he remembered to wait patiently. Joey can then reflect back on his journal and decide how well he mastered waiting patiently. This will allow him to think back on his actions and decide if it was the right thing to do. Additionally, as teachers, we can provide positive reinforcements for the times that Joey does remember to wait patiently. We can offer him specific rewards based on his behavior. For example, if he remembered to wait patiently 3 times during the week, he'll get a special pencil, just for him. If Joey's teachers implement these differentiation techniques, it is likely that Joey will do better in many of his classes. However, it's important to note that this is always a work in progress, and not everything will work with Joey. He is, after all, only human. As teachers, we can learn a lot from Joey. He has provided us the opportunity to become better teachers, not just for students with disabilities, but for all of our students in the general education classroom. For more information on attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, check out these great resources.